Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Responsive Web Design 2. This is Lecture 2. Today, we are going to be covering Git and GitHub, what those two are and how we'll be using them in our class. And then we'll talk about GitHub Pages, what that is and how we're going to be using it in class. We will also have a participation exercise that we're going to be doing in class, which is also called GitHub Pages, where we'll be setting up your GitHub Pages site today in class. Announcements. The only announcement I have is that the sign-in sheet, or excuse me, I have the sign-in sheet is going around. And then the recording from Tuesday is available on the course website as well. So if you want to review what we discussed on Tuesday, that's available. All right, any questions before we get started with our discussion of Git and GitHub? All right, let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right, so before we start talking about Git and GitHub, we need to talk about version control systems. All right, so it is tools. Version control system is a tool that keeps track of changes within a project. So most of you have probably used some sort of version control before and not really realized it. How many people have used the undo button? Right? Everybody's used undo. Wonderful, wonderful key, right? That is a way of doing version control, really, because you're going back in the past, something that you did before. You may have also done something like, oh, I want to make a change to this file, but I want to keep the original, so I'm just going to make a copy of it and then add version 2 afterwards. That's a primitive version of version control, okay? These are all ways of doing version control. So, but a version control system will do that automatically for us, and it adds a lot of extra features for us as well. So it'll keep track of our changes within a project. It keeps a long-term history of each file, so that we can then roll back if we need to. They can also allow us to branch or merge projects. So say you have an idea for a project, but you're not sure that you want to commit to it, you'll make a branch. You'll make a copy of that project and then kind of move forward. And if you like it, then you'll merge it into the main one. If you don't like it, you'll just abandon it and go back to the original. Okay? That's what version controls allows. And then we can log, a log is made of each change as well. So we can keep track of these changes. And if you're working in a group, you can see who made what change and who broke it and who you can blame, right? No, or who you can give credit for when something is done right. So we keep track of each change that is made. So we're going to be using Git in this course. And Git is a version control system. It's called a distributed version control system, which is slightly different than just a regular version control system. And a little bit of history about Git. It was created in 2005 by Linus Torvalds. Linus Torvalds. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because he is the creator of Linux as well. And he created Git for the Linux project so that he could keep it version controlled. When it was created, it had better performance, security, and flexibility than any other product out there. And because of that, it has become the most popular, by far, version control system out there today. It's also free and open source. So that's always great. So how do you work with Git inside of a project? So what's the workflow you would do? So when you have a project that you want to start tracking with version control, you will initialize that repository. Okay, so we have a project. It's like, okay, I should keep track of this. I'm going to initialize the Git repository. What that will do is that will add a little folder, a hidden folder inside of your project for Git to use to keep track of your project. Then you might check the status after you initialize the repository. You might check the status of the repository to make sure that it is actually being tracked. And most likely, if you just initialize it, it will just say, yes, you have a Git repository, there's nothing happening. Or more likely, if you have files already in there, you'll have some untracked files that need to be taken care of. So untracked files are new files that haven't been versioned yet, okay? So when you see the status that you have untracked files or maybe modified files, you'll want to stage those. So there are 2 levels inside of Git. There's this staging area. There's untracked and files that just sit out there. And then there's this staging area. We want to move any files we want to commit, take a snapshot of that we want to get to record. We'll move to the staging area. And then from there, we'll commit that file. And that tells Git to take a snapshot of our project. Okay? I want you to keep track of the project at this time. And that's really important because that will allow us to roll back then to that time if we decide that whatever changes we made weren't good. Okay? Then if we were working with remote repositories, which we will, that's what GitHub will work for us. They'll have remote repositories. Then we'll push those changes up to remote repository. So here are the commands. So Git is a command line interface. So this means you'll open up your terminal and you'll type in commands to make things happen. And these are the commands that you would use. Okay, there are not that many of them. So the first one here is git init. So this would allow us to initialize that repository. Okay, so when we decide that we want to start tracking a file, we'll use git init. Now, if you don't have a folder already created, you can create it at the same time. So you can go git init and then the name of your folder. That will create the folder and then initialize inside of it. Git status will give us the status of the repository. That will tell us if there's any untracked or modified files. Once we decide that we want to commit a file, we can add it to the staging area. So we use git add, and then we'll provide it with the file name that we want to push to the staging area. If you want to push all untracked or modified files, you can use --all. Okay, we're going to be going through all of these commands today. Right? There are some more. So once we have our files in the staging area, we'll commit them with git commit. Right? Now these next 3 are dealing with remote repositories. So we'll be creating a remote repository on GitHub today. That will be for your GitHub pages. So we'll need to clone it down from GitHub onto your local machine. So what cloning does is it takes a repository that exists somewhere else and creates that repository on your machine. That's where the distributed version control comes in. Unlike previous version control systems that existed before Git that were centralized, the repository existed on some server, Git is distributed. It means that every machine that works on the repository has the entire repository on their machine. This allows for quicker commits to occur because you're just logging straight to your machine. You're not having to go over the web. It also makes it more safe because it's actually distributed across multiple devices so that if there's a server failure, you haven't lost all of your work. So we'll clone, and then we'll have pull and push to get commits and add commits. Again, we're going to be going through all of these in detail. Right? But these are the commands we'll be using in Git. Now, I'm going to show you how to do everything using the terminal and command line, and then I'm going to show you how you can use the GUI interface built into Visual Studio Code. And that's probably what you'll be using for a majority of the class. But I do want to show you the command line first so you're aware that they do it. All right, so that's Git. We're going to talk about GitHub now. So GitHub is a web hosting service for remote Git repositories. Okay, so one of the things with the distributed nature of Git, it meant that everybody had their own repositories. We still often need a central location for people to share their repositories. And there are many services out there, but the most popular one today is GitHub. Okay. In addition to having a web hosting of Git repositories, it also integrates many professional collaboration tools because so many people use Git for working on projects, and most of the time these are large teams. They're going to need some way of collaborating. So there's a whole issues built into GitHub, which allows you to keep track of problems or features that you want to add to a project. There's also communications and ways of putting out releases, all built into GitHub. We won't be really covering many of these in this course, but in later courses, you'll spend some time with. There's also a whole social network for developers and content creators I mean, GitHub is considered a little bit of kind of a coder social network. It allows people to share their work as well as get work from each other and communicate. So some of the tools that you can do on GitHub, the website, is you can create remote repositories. We will be doing this today. You can fork existing repositories. So if somebody has a repository, a project that you like, and it's out on GitHub and it's public, it's an open source project, you can fork it, which means create a copy and put it in your own account. And then you can do whatever you want with that project. That's part of the whole open source movement. We won't really be using that so much in this course, but it's out there. You can submit issues. So if you are working on a project or you're working with a project and you find a bug in somebody else's code, you can submit an issue to GitHub and let them know, hey, I discovered this bug. You might want to fix that. And they can then track it, make the changes they need to. You can make pull requests. So pull requests, again, a little bit more advanced feature, but this is if you find a project that you really like and you want to contribute to it, you want to make changes to it, you can do that. And then the administrators of that project, you can say, hey, I added this new feature to your project. Why don't you go ahead and add it to the project yourself, okay? And then you'll make a pull request. Tell them to pull in your changes that you make. Okay? Again, not something we're going to be using in this class, but something you can do. And then, of course, then you can collaborate with developers and content creators as well. Okay, so that is GitHub, the website. Now let's talk a little bit about GitHub Pages. I do apologize. I'm moving through this very quick, but I want to get through this so we can actually do some hands-on. So GitHub Pages is a static site hosting service. We got a question? Yeah. So GitHub Pages is a static site hosting service. So what that does is it allows you to basically host for free a site that has HTML, CSS, or JavaScript on it. So anything that doesn't require server-side, which you haven't really learned yet in this program, but basically anything you've learned in this program can be hosted on GitHub Pages for free and would be public for anyone to see. So if you wanted to create, for example, a web portfolio to show what you can do and to show the work you've done, you can do that on GitHub Pages. We're going to be setting that up today. So it's great for hosting personal websites, and it's free. Okay. It will be required for some assignments in this course. Okay, so again, we're going to be setting that up today. That's going to be your assignment for today. And then we will be pushing it throughout the course. We'll say this assignment needs to be pushed up to your GitHub pages. All right. So that is, again, an overview of Git, GitHub, and GitHub Pages. All right. So that was just to kind of give you an overview. Now we're going to actually do some learning stuff. All right. So before we get started, first thing we're going to do is we need to set up for the Windows folks. We need to set up something that didn't get set up on Tuesday. So if you have Windows, I need you to pay attention. For the Mac folks, you can just tune out for a moment. So when we installed Git on your machine, it came with a program called Git Bash. And Git Bash is a terminal application. It's the one we want to use. And because Visual Studio Code has a built-in terminal that we're most likely going to be using for our projects, we need to connect it to your Git Bash. All right, so in order to do that, the easiest way to do that is through the command palette. Okay, so on Windows, if you hit Control-Shift-P, that will open up the command palette. Then you want to type in terminal. And hopefully you should see, now mine is showing up first because I just ran this command, but you should see a command for select default shell. If you need to type in select, you might want to do that to narrow it down. But you want to get to the select default shell. Again, this is only for Windows. Once you have that selected, you'll hit the Enter key, and it will come up with a list of a list of terminals that you can use, terminal applications. Now, I do not have Git installed on my virtual machine here, but you should see, if you do have Git installed, you should see Git Bash listed. You'll want to select that, and you can just highlight it and then hit enter. And that will connect your integrated terminal in VS Code to your Git Bash. And that will be important so that we can run commands right inside of Visual Studio. Any issues? Yes. Right. So once to figure out if you've done it right, what we can do is you can open up a new terminal. So if you go to terminal, go to new terminal. And right here, right now it's listing command for me because that's the default for me. This should say Git Bash or just Bash. I don't remember what it actually lists at, but it should say that. If you don't see that, sometimes you have to close Visual Studio Code and open it up again, and then it should do that. Okay. If you're not seeing that, you can raise your hand. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, the next thing we want to do is we're just going to go ahead and jump right into creating our GitHub pages because that's the best way to get started working with Git. So if you go out to the course website, okay, so that's mdac.github.io/mtm6201-w20. Then we'll go to the content page, and we'll go to week 1, and we'll scroll down to GitHub Pages. Okay, not the assignment GitHub Pages. You can go there, but really we want to go here. Okay, to the content page. So under the topics, it's the very last topic, GitHub Pages. Okay, this talks about GitHub Pages, but it also explains how to set it up. I'm going to walk through it, but I want to give you the instructions here in case you want to work ahead. Okay, so here are the instructions on how to set up GitHub Pages. Okay, I'm going to walk through it too. All right, but that's there for you. So if you want to set up GitHub Pages with me, the first thing we need to do is go to github.com. So go to github.com and log in if you haven't logged in already. Yes, it's asking. Okay, we actually, so we're going to have to, you've actually created the wrong repository. So if you go back to GitHub and just follow along, yeah, go there because we're going to have to create a new repository. All right, so hopefully everyone has gone to GitHub, if you're following along, and we're going to create a new repository. So to create a new repository, we just go to the New button right here. That will open you up to the new repository page right here. Okay, so the first thing is this repository template. Just ignore that. That's something new they've added. We're not going to be working with that. What we really want to do is provide a repository name. Now, for GitHub Pages, this name must be a very specific name. Okay, it is your GitHub username.github.io. So my username is Eisenbaum. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Eisenbaum.github.io. Okay, so you will use your GitHub username.github.io. That is the repository name. Usually when you create a repository, you can name it anything you want as long as it's unique to you. But for GitHub Pages, it needs to be this. Okay, Then you have a description. The description is optional, but I do encourage you to put some sort of description in there. You can simply say that this is my GitHub Pages, or maybe you plan to use this for your web portfolio later on. You can say this is my public web portfolio. Okay, so I'm going to put this is my GitHub Pages, something like that. Okay. Now, the next option is to create whether or not this repository is public or private. Recently, GitHub has changed their policies so that in the past, if you wanted to create a private repository, that means that your code was protected and nobody else could see it but you. You had to pay for the service, but they've changed that since then. I believe everybody has access to private repositories now. But with that said, we do want this to be a public repository because in order for it to have GitHub Pages, in order for it to be a public site, it needs to be a public repository. So you do want to keep this public. In the future, if you wanted to create a repository that you want to put code on there, that you do want to keep secret, that nobody could see, you can make it private. Okay, just note that public repositories anyone can see. Doesn't mean they can edit it, but they can see it. All right, the next one is to initialize a README. Typically, I would say you want to do this. We're not going to do it in this case because I want to set it up differently. But in most cases, when you create a new repository, I encourage you to create a README file. The README file basically gives you a little overview of what this repository is doing, a little bit more than just your description. It'll give you some details about this repository. Sometimes if you have a product, it'll give you the instructions. Okay, but we're not going to create the README here. Then down below you have the get ignore. We'll talk about get ignore a little bit later. We're going to leave this blank. And then add a license. So if you wanted to create an open source project, you still have to have some sort of license related to it, and you can choose which license you're going to use. Again, this is not really an open source project. This is going to be a website for you, so we don't need to have any license. Okay, so really the only thing you needed was your repository name. Then we'll click that public, and then we'll just click create repository. And that will take you to this page right here. So this is your repository page. This is where you could see all of the files that are in your repository. Right now we don't have any files in our repository, so we kind of see this. What do you want to do now? Okay. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to clone our repository down, and then we're going to add a file, and we'll push that file back up. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is to get the URL for our repository, and that's this right here. Okay. Now, mine is using SSH, so it looks a little different than yours. You'll probably want to use HTTPS, which is probably pre-selected for you. Okay. Just take note. Mine's going to look a little different. Has to do with how you're logging in. I've added extra security to my account. Okay, so you just want to copy this. You can either select it or you can hit the little clipboard button. Both ways will copy it. Once you have it copied to your clipboard, we're going to move over to your terminal. Actually, we're going to move over to VS Code and run the terminal through VS Code. All right, so let's go back to VS Code. So from GitHub, you want to go ahead and open up VS Code. And now we're going to open up a directory in VS Code. So whatever directory you're going to be using for this course, okay, I do encourage you to create a directory for this course. Call it MTM6201. Hopefully you have a place where you're keeping all this stuff. Whatever folder that is, that's what we want to open in VS Code. Okay, so I am going to, actually I think I need to create one. So I keep all my stuff in a sites folder. So you can see I have a lot of stuff in there. And I need to create a folder for this course. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a new folder. Going to call it MTM6201. Okay. This is the folder I'm going to open up in VS Code. Okay, so I'm going to drag this down. Open it up like that. Now, the reason why we're going to do this is because we're going to open up the terminal inside of VS Code. And when you open up the integrated terminal in VS Code, it will automatically open you up to the directory that you have open in your file. So I've opened up the MTM6201 folder, so that's where my terminal is going to put me at. That makes it a lot easier to work with, rather than have to write long commands to change your directory. Okay, so that's why we want to do that step. Okay, so we want to open this. Even if there's nothing in there, go ahead and open it up. Now, we want to open up our terminal. So we're going to go to Terminal, New Terminal. Okay, so it should look something like that. You might have a little different sayings there, but generally that's the way it's going to look. Make this bigger. There we go. Okay, so there is your terminal. Now, we are going to run a command. We're going to type a command in to clone our repository down. And again, I'm going to show you how to do this in command line, and then I'll show you how to do it through the GUI interface. Okay, so with command line to clone our repository, we have it in the clipboard. So we're going to do git clone. So that's Git space clone. Okay, then space and then paste your URL in there. So git space clone space then paste your URL that you copied. Then you can hit enter. And it's going to clone your repository. Okay, it might give you a warning. It appears you've cloned an empty repository. That's okay. We know we've cloned an empty repository. But we have now, hopefully, if you got that, we have now successfully cloned our repository. We can even check to see that we have this repository because we're going to move into it. So what it's done is it's created a directory. If I come over here, I can see right here it's created a directory with the same name as the repository I created. It's my username.github.io. That is now inside my MTM6201. So I want to move into that using the terminal. We do that using the cd command. I know I'm throwing a lot of commands at you right now, but it's good to get comfortable with the command line. Yes. All right, so now that we have our repository cloned, it has created a folder inside for us. The folder will have the same name as the repository name. We need to move into that folder. Okay, so in order to change directories using the terminal, we use the cd command. Okay, cd. Okay, and then we'll use a space, and then we give it the name of the repository we want to go into. So this is the name that you named your repository directory. So it's whatever your username is, .github.io. Now, when you're using terminal, you don't have to type in the whole thing. You can just start typing, and then you can tab. And that usually will autocomplete. Okay? So add the rest for me. So just start typing your username, then type a couple letters, then hit tab. And it should recognize that you have it, and then you can just go through it. Once you have that typed in, you hit enter, and that's going to move you inside of that directory. Now, I know this sounds a little intimidating because we're using all these command lines. It is important that you get comfortable with this. Okay? We're not going to be using this every day. In fact, this is probably the only day we're going to be using it. But I wanted to get you introduced to the command line. I might introduce it a little bit later on in the course, but I'm going to introduce it kind of gradually. All right, so now that we're in our directory with our repository, we need to check to see the status of our Git repository, our local Git repository. We want to basically see, does it have the repository initialized? It should, because we cloned it down. Okay, so we're going to check the status. To check the status of a repository, we use git status. So git status. Okay, git space status. This will tell us what are the files that have been changed or modified or added. Now, if we hit this, it's going to say there's nothing there because it's a brand new repository. We haven't done anything to it yet. Okay? But it does say that there is, you should have something like on branch master. Okay? This lets us know that yes, there is a Git repository. It has been initialized. We just haven't made any changes. Okay, we're going to use Git status again here. All right, so I think we're done. We're done with the command line. That's to show you kind of what you can do with the command line. Now we're going to move on. I'm going to show you how we do this using the GUI interface inside of Visual Studio Code. Okay, so go ahead and leave your terminal open. I'm going to leave it open. And I'm going to open up my little file explorer here. Okay, so yours should look something similar like this. You should have the main directory that you had open for all your projects for the course. And then you should see the repository that you cloned down. If you open it up, there shouldn't be anything inside of it, right? Because it's a brand new repository. We haven't created anything. So we're going to add a new file to this repository. Okay, to create a new file inside of Visual Studio Code, we can just hover over the new file icon right here. Okay, so right here's the icon. It says new file. We'll just click on that, and it's going to give us an option to name this file. We're going to call it index.html. Okay, so index.html. Now, you'll notice that things started changing. Everything turned green. That's because Visual Studio Code recognizes that this is a Git repository, and it's letting us know that we have now created a new file. It says U here, that stands for untracked. That means this is a new file, and it's not being tracked by Git yet, okay, because we just created it. If it doesn't turn green, it may not be recognizing that you have a Git repository. Okay, and actually it's because you've moved your file is not in your repository, it's inside the other folder. So we're just going to drag that in there. Okay, move. There it goes. Now it's in green. So yeah, make sure that you've created this file inside of your repository. Okay, you don't want it inside of the main folder. We want it inside the repository. Okay, now that we have our index.html page open, we're going to go ahead and create an HTML page. Okay, in the instructions on GitHub Pages, it says to just add your name, but we're going to skip ahead, and we're just going to create the full HTML page. The easiest way to create an HTML page in Visual Studio Code is to use the Emmet shortcuts. Okay. So to create an HTML5 page, you can use the exclamation point, okay, right there. Okay, the exclamation point. Okay, so that's the Shift 1. Shift 1, that gets you the exclamation point, and you can hit Tab. That will create the default HTML5 structure page. Okay, I'm going to close my terminal here so you can see it. And I will do that again. Okay, so inside of your index.html page, you clicked inside there, you got your cursor, just put the exclamation point, then tab. That will create the default HTML5 structure. I highly recommend doing this every time you create an HTML page. No reason to type all of this every time. Just use the Emmet shortcut. Now, another advantage of doing this is that it will pre-highlight certain things that you might want to change. So you notice that right now it's selecting device width. Okay, we're going to leave that alone, but I can hit Tab and move to the next selection. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to tab to the next selection. Again, going to leave that alone. And now I'm inside of my title. This is the next thing that you should always do. You should always update the title of your HTML page. Okay? There are so many times I've seen sites, public sites of major corporations, and it says untitled as the title because they forgot to update the title. Okay? So you should always right after you create the page, provide it with the title. Okay? Give the title your name. Okay? So I'm going to type in my name, Michael Eisenbrown. So again, right after you've created the HTML structure using Emmet, tab till you get to the title, provide the title, give it your name. Then you can hit tab one more time, and that's going to put you inside of the body. And now once you're inside of the body, again, inside of header 1, add your name. Okay, so we could take an H1 tag. Again, you can do a shortcut with Emmet. You can just type in H1 tab. That will create the tag for you. And then you can type in your name. Once you've done that, you want to save this file. Okay, so hit Command S or Control S. Save the file. All right. Everyone got that? Okay. Now we're going to do the commits. We're going to use the GUI for this. All right. So you should notice on the left sidebar here, we have this little 1. Everyone see the 1 on theirs? Okay. This is our source control panel. Okay. That 1 indicates the number of changes that are waiting for us. Okay. So if we click the source control panel, that will open it up. I'm going to open mine a little bit bigger so you can see. All right. So this is the GUI interface for using Git. Normally we use the command line, but we have this wonderful GUI interface inside of Visual Studio Code. Okay. So if you have any changes that you've made that still haven't been committed, they'll be listed here. So we have changes, and we should have just one file, index.html. It should have a little U next to it saying that's untracked. It means it's a new file as opposed to a modified file. If it's a modified file, it has a little M, and it's in orange or yellow. Okay, so with Git, remember that with Git, we have our changes, and then we have our staging area. We can only commit from our staging area. Okay? This allows us to make changes to multiple files and then just stage a few to commit. Okay? I do this all the time. I'm working on a project, I'll make multiple changes, but I don't want to commit all at once. I'm going to select the files I want to commit, and I'll move those to the staging area. Okay? So we're going to move this one file to the staging area. We do that by hitting this plus sign. Okay? It says stage changes. Okay? So we're going to hit the plus sign. And now you'll see stage changes as opposed to just changes. So these are the ones that are in the staging area. You can only commit from the staging area. Okay? We can only commit from the staging area. So we do have to hit plus to stage our changes. And then from there, we're going to commit. Now, when you make a commit, you need to provide a message. Now, there are some best practices around messaging. Okay, the messages you provide commits, right? First and foremost, they should be in the present tense, not in the past tense. It shouldn't be created index.html. It should be creates index.html or create index.html. There's a whole methodology behind this. It has to do with that we're trying to describe what the commit will do, not what it did or what you did. Okay? It should also be short and succinct and roughly describe what you're doing. So creates index.html page pretty much is pretty succinct, and it does describe what we just did. Okay, so that's what we're going to type in here. So inside the message box right up here, we'll type in creates index.html. All right, so once we have our commit made, we want to push it up to GitHub. So right next to our branch, this is the branch. Again, we're not going to talk about branches in this course, but master indicates the branch. Right next to that, you're going to see a little cloud with an up arrow. This will be turned, once we've pushed up once, this will turn into a number later on. But this little cloud with a branch lets us know that we can push these changes up to GitHub. Okay, so we just have to click on it. Okay, so the little cloud with an up arrow, we just want to click on that. It's going to cycle through, and what this is going to do, this is going to push up those changes to GitHub. Okay, so if we were to go back to GitHub Pages, sorry, I've lost. If we go to our GitHub Pages page right here, you can refresh the page, and you should see it change to what the repository looks like, and you should see the file that we just created. All right, for those of you who have successfully pushed up your index.html page, you can now should be able to go to your website. So if you open up your browser, you can go to basically your repository name. So your username .github.io. So my username is eisenboom.github.io. Okay, so go to your username.github.io. If you hit enter, you should see your page. Okay. Okay, so real quick, some of you are still having problems. I am going to go around and make sure everybody has this working before the end of the day. But if you have gotten it successfully up there, there is some more you need to do for the assignment. Okay, so let me talk about the actual assignment that you need to do here. Sorry, I lost my... All right, so we've created, once you have the GitHub pages, if you go back to content page, there is the assignment that's very confusingly named also GitHub Pages. There are some extra things you need to add to your page for the assignment, okay? You already have your full name, but you need to add the course and section number, as well as your GitHub username, and one interesting thing you did over break, okay? So that has to be added to your site. Then you need to submit the URL to your website to Brightspace. Okay, that is for the assignment. So make sure you do complete all of those tasks. Now, if you're still trying to get your site up, please just raise your hand, and I'm going to be working around and try to get everybody. Okay, so I know a lot of you still have it, but I do want, because some people are done, and I want to make sure that I'm not keeping people around who don't need to be here. So, okay. Real quick, so here is the assignment that we're just going over, and most of you already have. So make sure you submit to Brightspace. This is due tonight. Hopefully everyone has it done before we leave. Okay, so next time, what we're going to be learning about next week is we're going to be learning about CSS cascade, inheritance, and specificity. Okay, we'll have a participation exercise to work on in class, Bad Piggies. Okay, so that's what we're covering next time. If you are completed your assignment or you feel confident you complete it tonight, you are welcome to go. If you're struggling and you need help, please stick around and I'll come around and help you. All right? Thank you for bearing with this. Hopefully future classes won't be quite so rough. All right? Thank you. We'll see you next week.